Hey guys, it's Tyken here. I'm back with another video for you, so let's dive right in. Oh, and don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment. Let me know which manhwa you want to see next. Let's go!
Cornered, the young man prepared for a desperate measure. The idea of being captured was terrifying, and he would do anything to avoid it. His pursuers caught up to him, trying to immobilize him with brute force. But he knew he couldn't, under any circumstances, let them take him. With his body trapped, he realized it was the end of the line. If he was caught there, everything would be over. Only one terrible option remained. Then he made his decision. Without hesitating, he connected the cables, choosing his own end. A massive discharge of energy exploded, illuminating everything around. It was the consequence of his choice. He preferred death to being captured. The electricity coursed through his body and that of his attackers, revealing the same fate to all. Except, for him, death wasn't an option. Inside his body pulsed the heart of resurrection. No matter the damage he suffered, he simply couldn't die. His body always regenerated, condemning him to live forever. This ability came from a rare mutation. People with these powers were called heart mutants, and he was known as the Resurrection Kid. Many saw these powers as a divine blessing, something to be admired. But for the young man, that idea was a bad joke. In the world, there were others like him. People capable of manifesting extraordinary abilities, like controlling nature itself. These mutants used their powers to fight and survive in a world that feared and hunted them. Meanwhile, the Resurrection Kid's reality was quite different. His immortality didn't lead him to great battles, but to rummaging through the trash for something to eat. The hunger was so intense that it surpassed any other sensation. His only concern at the moment was finding any scraps that could relieve his stomach. He blamed his heart for leading him to that situation. Immortality was not a blessing, but a curse that condemned him to a life of misery. His desperate search for food led him to a filthy alley. Finding nothing in the trash, he began digging in an old flower pot, hoping to find anything he could eat. And then he saw it, a piece of bread thrown away recently. For someone starving, it was a real feast. Without thinking twice, the kid devoured the bread with a voracity that only extreme hunger could justify. While he caught his breath, an unexpected company appeared. A dog approached, wagging its tail, showing no fear of that skeletal figure. Even with his stomach still empty, he didn't hesitate. The young man extended what was left of his bread to the animal. But instead of taking the food, the dog simply licked his hand, as if thanking him for the gesture. That act of kindness attracted other animals from the alley. Dogs and cats gathered around him until a distant noise caught everyone's attention. Curious about the commotion, the kid went to see what was happening. He found the source of the noise, a group of bullies cornering a student. The girl was visibly scared and had nowhere to run. Seeing the scene, the skeleton's expression changed completely. That look of curiosity gave way to a silent fury. The girl cowered in fear, tightly hugging a large bag she was carrying. It was a bag of puppy food. The kid understood immediately. She was there to feed the same animals he had just encountered. At that moment, he decided he wouldn't just stand by and watch. A dark and imposing figure placed himself between the girl and the aggressors. The bullies were confused, not understanding who that weirdo was, who appeared out of nowhere to disrupt their fun. The answer came quickly. In the blink of an eye, the kid grabbed one of them by the collar, revealing the terrifying face that hid under the hood. The bully panicked completely upon seeing the kid's face. He screamed for the creature not to approach, completely terrified by what he saw. But the kid didn't seem to have any intention of attacking. He just watched the scene, with his frightening appearance being more than enough to solve the problem. It was enough for the aggressors to flee without thinking twice, leaving behind only the girl and her mysterious savior. The young woman was paralyzed, not knowing how to react. She had been saved, but the figure in front of her was as or more frightening than the bullies themselves. Then, the creature turned to her. For the girl, that was the end. The monster that saved her was now coming to finish the job. In a reflex of pure terror, she cowered, waiting for the worst. There was nowhere to run, only the attack never came. Instead, the kid bent down and, in a timid voice, asked if he could take some of the food that had fallen on the ground. The girl didn't understand anything. That scary being who she thought was a monster was just hungry? She began to wonder if he was some kind of mutant. The object of his desire was not her, but the dog food scattered on the ground. Without any ceremony, the kid began to eat the food straight from the ground, seeming genuinely happy with the makeshift meal. The scene was disturbing. The girl watched everything with a mix of horror and pity, realizing the desperate situation of that creature. Shocked, the young woman ran away. At that moment, the real owners of the food appeared, and the boy found himself sharing his meal with a pack of stray dogs. He noticed that the girl had fled. The boy was used to this kind of reaction, but still, it was a little disappointing. But hunger was more important. He continued eating the dog food, enjoying the momentary peace he achieved thanks to the girl. Except she didn't go far. Hidden, the girl watched him, and the feeling of fear began to be replaced by something else. Maybe she misjudged him. Watching the scene, the girl felt a pang of conscience. He didn't seem like a threat, just someone hungry and alone, sharing what little he had with stray animals. Suddenly, the boy realized he was no longer alone. He felt a presence nearby, but he couldn't tell what it was. The dogs also seemed to notice the change in the air. The guilt of running away was greater than the fear. She took a deep breath and decided that she needed to fix the mistake she made by judging him only by his appearance. And then, she approached. The boy looked up, surprised to see her standing right in front of him, showing no panic. With trembling hands, the girl offered her own snack. She apologized for running away before, saying she shouldn't have judged him that way. The boy was speechless. He looked at the dog food in his hand and then at the sandwich. It was the first time someone had offered him real food, despite his appearance. With his hand also trembling, he accepted the gift. He recognized the packaging from some he had seen in the trash, but he never imagined that one day he would hold one of those. That simple snack seemed like something out of this world to him. Without hesitation, he took the first bite. That taste was something he had never experienced in his entire life, an explosion of sensations that left him completely shocked. The vegetables, the bread, the meat, everything was so fresh that he felt he could die happy at that moment, without any regrets. At that moment, looking at the girl who saved him from hunger and who was now petting the dogs, the boy was sure of one thing: she was an angel. Seeing his situation, the girl's compassion spoke louder. She questioned him, wanting to understand why someone like the girl's questions seemed to amuse the creature. He stared at her with a sickly interest, as if he had just found a new and intriguing toy to break. But the girl's reaction was not fear. She responded to the sickly interest with an equally disturbing smile, showing that maybe the toy wasn't as defenseless as the creature imagined. The tense atmosphere broke. Instead of continuing the intimidation game, the boy prepared to tell his story, with the stray dogs as his only audience. The girl listened carefully, but the story he began to tell was much darker than she could imagine. Worry took over her face. He began to explain the reason for his appearance. It wasn't a disease or a curse, but something they did to him, while the dogs seemed to offer silent comfort. With each word, the reality of the situation became heavier. The young woman could barely process the cruelty she was hearing. The boy then revealed the truth behind his skeletal body, a story of pain and suffering that he had carried for a decade. For 10 years, he was tortured and used in experiments. They forced him to ingest poisons, treating his body as a disposable test object day after day. The revelation hit her hard. The story was so horrible that she was speechless, completely shocked by what he had endured alone. He explained that he possessed the heart of resurrection. No matter what they did, his body always regenerated, condemning him to an endless cycle of pain and recovery. After the heavy revelation, he tried to change the subject, covering his face. He invited her to go somewhere with him, as if he wanted to escape those memories. But the girl didn't waver. Instead of pity or fear, her eyes showed a new determination. At that moment, she made a decision. The boy waited for her answer, perhaps expecting to be rejected after telling such a terrible story. Except, instead of backing down, she stood up. She wasn't going to leave him alone with that burden. Without hesitation, the girl grabbed his hand and started running, pulling him along. She had a plan, and he wouldn't have time to question it. She guided him through the streets, taking the lead. At that moment, the roles were reversed. He was no longer the scary creature, but a survivor being helped. Her touch was the first human connection he had felt in years. A simple gesture, but one that meant that, for the first time, he was no longer alone. The girl's plan to help him blend in started in an unusual way. She improvised a disguise, and the boy, for the first time in a long time, felt genuinely embarrassed by the attention. But before he could question her fashion choice, the young woman interrupted him. Her plan wasn't over yet, except in her haste, she ended up pulling a little too hard. His arm simply came off, leaving the girl in total panic with the limb in her hand. While she despaired, the boy just watched the scene, completely calm. For someone who regenerated from any injury, that was just a minor inconvenience. She could barely look, mortified by what she had done. He, on the other hand, tried to calm her down, explaining that it was okay and that it didn't hurt. Having overcome the arm incident, the girl revealed the next part of the plan. New clothes. They were simple, but for the boy, it was something he hadn't received in a decade. She explained that they were cheap clothes, nothing special, but they would do for now. A gesture of normalcy amidst the chaos of his life. Her intention was clear, to give him a chance to feel human again, even if it was just with a new set of clothes. But for the boy, this was much more than a gift. The feeling of the fabric was something he had almost completely forgotten. He felt warm, as if he had gained a new skin. For someone who only knew the cold of laboratories, those clothes were the greatest luxury in the world. But the disguise wasn't complete. The girl warned that his face was still a problem, and without being able to use a mask, the solution would be makeup. She admitted that she had never put makeup on a skeleton before, and that the result might not be the best. But she was determined to try. The result was creative, complete with blush, lipstick, and even glasses to complete the look. A true work of art, and art it is. Incredibly, the boy loved everything, saying he loved the clothes and makeup. The girl, however, could only think that he hadn't seen himself in the mirror yet. She peeked through her fingers, torn between the shame of the result and the relief of seeing him genuinely happy. The real test would come when he found the first reflection. Somewhere else, Song Hyeji stared at her cell phone in complete shock. The news she saw left her paralyzed, not knowing how to react to what she had just discovered about the boy. But before that, the farewell had been quick. Hyeji said it was nice to meet him, but it was time for her to leave, leaving the boy behind with his new pack. From afar, she shouted one last request, that he take good care of the dogs. A small phrase that, for the young man, meant more than she could imagine. Alone again, the boy just watched her leave. The creative makeup on his face was a reminder of the brief moment of normalcy he had just experienced. He repeated her name in his mind. Song Hyeji, the first person who didn't run away from him, who treated him with kindness. And then, it hit him. If she asked him to take care of the dogs, it could only mean one thing. She would be back the next day. A spark of hope ignited inside him. His memories, however, were a dark contrast. He remembered the laboratory, where he was treated not as a person, but as a lab rat, an object of study. Hyeji was different. He recalled the moment when she stood by his side, unafraid. She was the first person to treat him like a human being in a long time. Back in the present, he allowed himself to relax with his new friends. The kindness he received was something he hadn't felt in so long that he had almost forgotten what it was like. One of the dogs licked his face, and the boy felt a warmth that didn't just come from the animal's gesture. He was genuinely happy. He petted the little dog, enjoying that moment of peace and acceptance that he so desperately needed. The memory of Hyeji and her act of kindness left him completely on cloud nine, lost in feelings he didn't know he could still have. For the first time in a decade, he didn't feel like a monster or a freak. He just felt himself with a somewhat peculiar disguise. The young man stood there with a smile that not even the skeleton makeup could hide. He was looking forward to tomorrow. Surrounded by the dogs, he found a small refuge. At that moment, he believed that maybe, just maybe, things could finally start to get better. But the feeling of hope was short-lived. The harsh reality of his condition soon returned to haunt him, a constant reminder of what he was beneath the disguise. He set off without a specific destination in mind. Looking back at the place that offered him a brief refuge, the boy decided he couldn't stay. He needed to leave, even without knowing where to go. The world out there was vast and indifferent, and he was completely alone again, walking towards the city. Hunger and fatigue began to take their toll, and his body could no longer withstand the effort. And then, he simply collapsed on the ground, in the middle of the trash, completely exhausted. When he woke up, the first thing he felt was something strange in his hand. It was a rat. The situation couldn't get any more humiliating. He realized that he had simply passed out while walking. He couldn't afford to be so careless if he wanted to survive. That's when he rummaged through his clothes and found something he had saved. It was dog food, the only thing he had to eat. But in his mind, hungry for any comfort, that food turned into something much better, a real sandwich. He started eating, trying to convince himself that the green was lettuce, the yellow was bread, and the brown was meat, an imaginary feast. And for a brief moment, the illusion was so strong that he almost believed it. The taste was surprisingly good, except he wasn't the only one who thought that food was delicious. Suddenly, the real owner of the food appeared to claim his share. The boy froze, staring at the dog who had just stolen his only and precious meal. The boy was completely paralyzed. His mind, exhausted and famished, could barely process that his only meal had been stolen by a dog. He just stared at the animal, which seemed perfectly happy with the situation. In his delirium, a name popped into his head for the little thief. Potato! The situation was so absurd that he didn't feel anger, just emptiness. A strange, tired smile formed on his skeletal face. At that moment, he was grateful for his appearance. If he had a normal face, the emotion he felt would have been obvious to anyone. Suddenly, a familiar voice snapped him out of his stupor. The girl he knew had found him, and she didn't seem happy that he had disappeared. The truth is, he was relieved. The joy of being found was so great that, if he could, it would be plastered all over his face. She wasted no time and, first of all, started feeding the pack of dogs that surrounded her, showing that she already knew them all. Soon after, the young woman turned to the boy and apologized, worried that he hadn't eaten anything decent since the day before. He didn't know how to react to that concern. It was a strange feeling after spending so long fighting alone to survive. She noticed his silence and just smiled, saying that she had bought a bunch of things from the convenience store for him. Even little Potato, the dog who had stolen his food, came over and gave him a lick as if he was apologizing. Then, she spread the food on the ground. It wasn't a feast, but for the boy, it was more than enough to help his body recover. The girl took even more things out of her backpack, showing that she had come fully prepared to take care of him. She prepared an improvised dessert, explaining that cookies with milk was an incredible combination, a small gesture of kindness that meant the world. She then handed him the meal. It was simple, but for someone who was about to eat dog food, it was a real feast. The boy received the dessert she prepared. After almost eating dog food, it seemed like the best food in the world, a gesture of kindness he didn't expect. He took the first bite. The taste was so intense and delicious that it was almost unbelievable for someone who hadn't really eaten in so long. Emotion took over him. The simple combination of milk and cookies, along with the girl's concern, made him cry with pure happiness and relief. The girl found his exaggerated reaction hilarious. The boy's joy was so genuine and pure that she couldn't contain her laughter. Suddenly, he felt something different. The food wasn't just killing his hunger, it was accelerating his regeneration. His bones were visibly healing. She, curious, asked if there were other ways for him to heal faster. In his mind, a terrible image arose. The most efficient method involved absorbing blood. He imagined what he would have to do. It was a dark power that he possessed, an ability that would heal his body, but that would surely terrify her. He knew that the price for his full recovery would be revealing his monstrous nature to the only person who had been kind to him. Therefore, he decided to hide the truth. He told her that just eating was enough for now, sparing her the dark details. She then began to put the pieces together. She understood that the reason he lived in hiding was not by choice, but because he was being hunted. He confirmed her suspicions. The laboratory that created him was still after him, wanting his body back to continue with the experiments. Therefore, he tried to push her away. Calling her by name, Hyeji, he explained that if she continued to be involved with him, she would also be in great danger. He insisted that she didn't need to be kind to him anymore. For her own safety, it was better that they parted ways right there. Hyeji suggested going to the police, but he refused the idea right away. He knew that, with his appearance, he would be treated like a monster and no one would believe his story. But she had a shocking answer to that. She told him not to worry, as her older sister was a police officer. What's more, she was also a mutant. The boy was in complete shock. Her sister was not only a police officer, but also a mutant? The revelation was simply unbelievable, and he didn't know how to react. Hyeji begged for his trust, even if it was just for once. She assured him that her sister was a good person and that she could really help in his situation. For 3 long years, he only knew what it was like to run and be hunted. It was the first time that someone, instead of chasing him, reached out to really help. Hyeji's sincerity began to break down the barriers he had built. The offer of help was real, and the young man was beginning to believe that maybe there was a way out. She explained that her sister was a mutant of the heart, confirming that there were others like him in the world. The information was so surreal that the boy could barely process it. At that moment, he made a decision. He would no longer run like a coward. He promised himself that he would come back to see her, no matter what happened. While watching the dogs that Hyeji cared for, a strange feeling took over him. The feeling of having someone by his side, helping, was something completely new. Hyeji's smile was of pure relief and happiness. She told him to behave well, as the shelter would be in contact soon to help the animals. And with that, a spark of hope ignited. Maybe, just maybe, he could finally live without having to constantly run. A normal life seemed possible. Hyeji warned that she needed to go home early, but asked him to have fun with the dogs. She said goodbye, leaving him with the pack. They spent time together, taking care of the animals. It was a moment of peace and normalcy that the boy hadn't experienced in years. One of the dogs in particular seemed extremely happy with the attention he was receiving, drooling with contentment. The boy crouched down to pet the animal, a simple gesture that showed that, beneath the frightening appearance, there was still a young man capable of kindness. That moment of tranquility was precious. The promise of a different life, without persecution, seemed increasingly real, although still a little distant. The peace of that place, symbolized by the happiness of the dogs, was a balm for his weary soul. But he knew that this calm wouldn't last forever. After the conversation, Hyeji said goodbye to the boy. That moment of peace with the dogs seemed like the beginning of a new life, one where he wouldn't have to run anymore. For the first time in a long time, the boy felt genuine hope. He wondered if, with someone's help, he could finally stop running and live like a normal person. The girl smiled, sharing that feeling. She was happy to have been able to offer a little normalcy to someone who only knew chaos. But the calm was brutally broken. Out of nowhere, a car sped up, heading straight for the boy. He barely had time to understand what was happening. The impact was violent, throwing his body into the air as if it were nothing. The young man fell hard on the asphalt, completely stunned and unable to move, and he wasn't the only target. Before he could react, one of the men who got out of the car grabbed Hyeji, who panicked. In seconds, the street was taken over by thugs. They clearly weren't there for a friendly conversation. Still recovering from being run over, the boy was easily immobilized. He didn't have the slightest chance to defend himself. Meanwhile, the apparent leader of the operation lit a cigarette, watching the scene with the coldness of someone who had already won. He stared at the boy, making it clear that it was personal. After so long, he had finally found the skeleton monster he had been looking for. But seeing Hyeji being dragged away because of him, the boy's despair turned to fury. He needed to do something to stop it. The cars sped off, taking the girl with them. The hope of a normal life had just turned to smoke. The boy ran with all his might, but it was useless. Guilt consumed him. Because of him, Hyeji was in danger, and he felt powerless to save her. In an act of pure desperation, the boy used himself as a projectile. He threw himself against the car, carrying Hyeji, turning the rope around his neck into a weapon. The pain no longer mattered. The only thing on his mind was that it was all his fault, and he couldn't let her pay the price for his weakness. The impact was brutal. He crashed into the vehicle with tremendous force, using his own hands to grab onto the metal. Agony ran through his body, but he couldn't let go. It was his only chance. Inside the car, the kidnappers were caught by surprise. The sudden and violent attack left them without reaction, as they held Hyeji tightly. His hands were destroyed in the impact, but he managed to attach himself to the roof of the car. He wasn't going anywhere. The driver tried to get rid of him, throwing the car from side to side. The boy was thrown around, but the rope he tied served as an anchor. His body was dragged across the asphalt at high speed. The sacrifice was immense, but necessary to slow them down. And even amidst the excruciating pain, his gaze was one of pure determination. He wasn't going to give up on her. It was then that unexpected help appeared on the road. The pack of dogs that he and Hyeji cared for appeared, jumping towards the danger. The dogs bit the rope and began to pull in unison. They weren't just barking, they were fighting alongside their friend. The combined strength of the pack was enough to destabilize the car, forcing the driver to lose control and skid on the track. Lying on the ground, injured and exhausted, the boy saw his loyal companions surrounding him, protecting him while the vehicle stopped. With the car immobilized, one of the men tried to open the door to escape the confusion. But it was too late. Several figures in suits were quickly approaching, surrounding the place. The situation had just gotten a lot more complicated. The situation exploded. The men got out of the car, not to run away, but to confront the pack that dared to stop them. The dogs, loyal to the end, did not back down an inch. The boy, already destroyed from being dragged, could barely react. He was completely vulnerable in the middle of the asphalt, at everyone's mercy. Without hesitation, the aggressors went after the animals. The pack's loyalty was met with brutal and cowardly violence, using sticks and whatever else they had on hand. Fallen, the boy felt a terrible helplessness. His friends, the dogs he protected, were now fighting and getting hurt in his place. Guilt and anger consumed him. He needed to do something, anything to stop it. Determination began to reignite in his bones. He couldn't just watch as they sacrificed themselves. With every blow his friends took, the urgency increased. It was then that he remembered. There was a way, a single thing that could recover him, even if just a little. Blood. He realized that the blood spilled by the attackers was his only chance. It wasn't much, but it might be enough for his body to start regenerating. With what little strength he had left, he crawled across the ground. Every inch was a battle, but he needed to reach that pool of blood. One of the attackers noticed the boy's pathetic movement and let out a cruel laugh, mocking his desperate attempt. But his attention was diverted by a terrible sound and a fresh splatter of blood on the asphalt. One of the most loyal dogs had just received a fatal blow. The boy saw his friend's body fall lifelessly to the ground. Too late, he had failed to protect him. In that instant, something inside him broke. The pain of loss turned into a silent, overwhelming fury. The little dog's name echoed in the boy's mind. Potato. He could only watch his friend take his last breath. Potato's death was just the beginning. The boy saw another of his friends, Kong, lying lifeless on the ground. The carnage had begun. The image of yet another dead companion brought back a terrible memory, a past he struggled to bury every day. He remembered all those he had lost. One by one, the names of his former friends echoed in his mind, each one a stab in his chest. The memory dragged him back to the hell where it all began. 10 years, an entire decade of suffering that turned him into something that barely resembled a human. He remembered the endless days he spent chained up, an experiment in a nameless laboratory, treated as an object and nothing more. Every day, the torture was repeated. People in protective suits held him down, performing the cruelest experiments on his immortal body. They destroyed him again and again, watching from afar, just to see him regenerate and start the cycle of pain the next day. His body was disintegrated, but his consciousness remained, an endless agony that repeated itself like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. Even in that hell, he never gave up. The boy planned his escape and, against all odds, managed to escape to the outside world. Feeling the fresh air for the first time, he believed that he would finally be happy, that the nightmare was over and a new life could begin. But the world outside was not the paradise he imagined. People didn't see him as a survivor. Contrary to what he expected, humanity rejected him with hatred and fear. To everyone, he was just a scary monster. Alone and abandoned, he realized that he had exchanged a concrete prison for another. The whole world was his cell now. His heart, pierced by countless betrayals and the pain of the world, refused to stop. An inexplicable force prevented him from giving up. It was in that moment of darkness that he found a new reason to live. The stray dogs and Hyeji. They didn't see him as a monster, but as family. Amidst the pain, a desire echoed in his mind. He just wanted to be human again, even if just for a moment. After the violent impact against the asphalt, the boy's body simply dissolved into a whirlwind of blood and flesh. It seemed like the end. His bones and tissues, which had regenerated so many times, were now completely disintegrating. There was nothing left there that resembled a human being. But then, the blood that had spread across the street stopped, and in an unnatural movement, it began to gather. The matter writhed, spinning in a vortex that began to give shape to a new body, limb by limb. First, an arm materialized out of nowhere, perfectly reconstructed. Then, a hand. Everything was falling back into place. In seconds, the boy was standing again, completely unharmed. He felt his whole body back as if nothing had happened. A wave of power coursed through his veins, a sensation he hadn't felt in a very, very long time. He looked at himself, confused by the strength that filled him. As he looked at his hand, an old memory surfaced. The sensation was familiar, almost forgotten. It was the same energy he felt when he was just a child, when the blood of the stray dogs transformed him for the first time. In that moment, he understood. The power that saved him wasn't just his, it was the power of the pack he protected. The memory hit him hard. The origin of everything, the power he felt now didn't come from a miracle, but from a tragedy. It came from the blood of the dogs he couldn't protect. In the present, the aggressors didn't understand what was happening. To them, the boy was just an easy target who refused to fall, and they were about to try again. One of them, more impatient, lunged forward with a knife, aiming for the young man's back. It was supposed to be the final blow. Except the boy wasn't the same as seconds ago. With absurd speed, he turned and delivered a devastating punch. The force of the impact was far beyond what any of them could expect. The aggressor flew like a rag doll and slammed against the side of the van with enough force to dent the metal. He wouldn't be getting up anytime soon. The memory continued to flow through his mind. He remembered the despair of holding his only friend, unable to do anything to save him. That day, he had been weak, powerless, and he swore to himself that he would never feel that way again. That old promise echoed into the present. The group leader couldn't believe what he was seeing. The prey had just become the hunter. Fear began to take over what was once pure arrogance. They finally realized they had messed with the wrong person. Too late. The boy looked up, and the pain in his eyes gave way to a cold fury. He only had one question, and he wanted to know who would answer first. Where did they take her? The answer, whatever it was, would lead him to an industrial complex on the outskirts of the city. The real confrontation was about to begin. Meanwhile, at a remote industrial complex, the kidnappers arrived with the girl. The place was isolated, perfect for what they planned to do. She was dragged inside, without the slightest chance to see where she was being taken or what awaited her. When they finally took the bag off her head, the captors taunted her. They laughed at her resistance, asking if she thought she had more than one life. Despite the fear plastered on her face, the young woman tried to remain firm. The situation was terrible, but she hadn't given up yet. She was completely surrounded, at a total disadvantage. The men made it clear that it was all the skeleton bastard's fault. She was only dragged into this mess because of him. But then, something they said, or maybe something she saw in the corner of the room, completely terrified her. It wasn't a simple kidnapping. The place was a human slaughterhouse. The young woman realized that she was in the midst of monsters who wouldn't hesitate to do the same to her. One of the men grabbed her by the hair, reminding her to be quiet if she didn't want to suffer the same terrible fate as the others. The group leader was a brutal man, covered in blood, and with a look that promised nothing good. He was the personification of danger. He then showed a photo, revealing their real target. Test subject number 1001, the skeleton who, somehow, had become the boy who saved her. The kidnapper pressed her, demanding information about the boy's whereabouts. His patience was clearly running out. Every second of her silence only increased the man's fury. He wasn't kidding around. For the girl, time seemed to have stopped. The panic was so great that she could barely breathe, let alone answer. But suddenly, in the midst of that unbearable tension, a phone started ringing. It was the boss on the other end of the line, and the news wasn't good at all. He was furious, questioning how his men let the skeleton escape and what this story of him turning into a person meant. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, unexpected help was in action. The stray dogs, loyal to the boy, were doing their best to help him escape. They pulled the ropes with all their might in a desperate attempt to free him before it was too late. The boss couldn't believe that his men had let the target, that skeleton, simply disappear after everything. On the other end of the line, he screamed, demanding a clear explanation. He wanted to know what had happened to the dogs and how the target escaped. The girl listened to the conversation, completely terrified. She didn't understand what they were talking about, but she felt that the situation was only getting worse every second. The kidnapper guarding her just listened to the boss's scolding without having anything to answer. The failure had been monumental. The call ended in the worst possible way. Blinded by rage, the man took out all his frustration on the device. He smashed the cell phone on the floor, shattering it into pieces. And all that fury was directed at the only person he could blame at the moment, the girl. He grabbed her, demanding to know where the boy had gone. He threatened her, saying that if she didn't talk, he would solve the problem himself. The young woman, paralyzed with fear, could barely breathe. Her despair was complete. The threat became real when he pulled out a knife, determined to get the information no matter what. The cold steel touched her skin, and absolute terror took over her eyes. It was the end of the line. But instead of screaming, something changed in the girl's face. Amidst the tears and panic, a bizarre, forced smile began to form. The kidnapper didn't understand her reaction. Confused and even more irritated, he grabbed her hair, ready to end it once and for all. But before the kidnapper could do anything, one of his men was violently thrown. The help the girl had been waiting for had finally arrived. That boss was known for his cruelty. He had dealt with countless enemies in the past, leaving a trail of destruction wherever he went. And then, a solitary figure appeared in the entrance, standing against the light. The chaos was interrupted by a sudden, heavy silence. The kidnapper's leader watched the newcomer. He didn't seem impressed at all, just more annoyed at being interrupted. It was the kid, the one they had been hunting so much. He was there, standing, his face covered in shadows, showing no emotion. One of the henchmen, more confident than the others, advanced with a knife. He yelled, thinking he had cornered his prey and that victory would be easy. But the attack never came. In the blink of an eye, the kid's hand was already on his neck, stopping the blow in its tracks. The aggressor felt the air escape his lungs. The strength of that grip was inhuman, crushing his throat without any effort. The young man stared at him with a cold, empty look, as if he was just discarding an insignificant obstacle that was in his way. With one hand, he lifted the man off the ground. The difference in power was so great that it was humiliating. Seeing the scene, the other henchmen didn't hesitate. They ran to attack from behind, trying to use their numerical advantage to their favor. The first punch hit him squarely in the back of the neck, a heavy blow that should have knocked anyone down instantly. But the kid barely moved. He just spat out a little blood, as if the attack was nothing to him. Before the aggressor could even retreat, the response came. A direct punch to the face with devastating force. The impact was brutal. The man was thrown backwards, completely knocked out. The kid didn't even turn to look, already focused on the next target. The fight awakened memories of a not-so-distant past. A time when the kid was captured, completely helpless in the hands of cruel men. They treated him without any mercy, with a violence that only served to humiliate and break him. It was a moment of pure agony, where he was taken to his absolute limit, feeling the pain they wanted to inflict. But that memory of weakness only served as fuel. Back in the present, he threw the body of the knocked-out henchman as if it were nothing. Seeing his strength, the boss finally connected the dots. That kid was the skeleton bastard they had heard so much about. The order was clear: bring all the weapons. The kid recomposed himself, unhurried. His calmness was more frightening than any war cry, and then he looked up. His eyes revealed a cold, calculating fury. The hunted had become the hunter. Watching from afar, the girl he saved couldn't believe what she was seeing. That power was simply inhuman. His image awakened a terrifying memory in the young woman, reminding her of another equally monstrous figure she had already encountered. The memory of what that boss did to her was still fresh. His cruelty was the reason for all of this. And deep in the kid's mind, the origin of his power and his suffering came to the surface. An existence of torture and confinement, treated like a chained monster. Suddenly, the sound of a gunshot echoed through the warehouse. A bullet hit him squarely in the back. The boss wasn't going to hesitate anymore. He grabbed a gun himself, determined to end it once and for all. He yelled at his men to shoot non-stop, believing that a rain of bullets could overwhelm the kid's regeneration. And then, everyone opened fire. A barrage of shots was fired at the young man, with the intention of tearing him to pieces. The order was given, and a hail of bullets hit the kid from all sides. There was nowhere to run, no way to escape that massive and merciless attack. Each projectile tore his flesh, piercing muscles and organs non-stop. The young man's body was thrown back by the force of the continuous impacts. The hail of bullets continued, destroying his body brutally and systematically, without giving him a single second to recover. The pain was unbearable, an agony he already knew very well. Every second of his existence turned into an eternity of suffering. He felt his flesh falling apart, his lungs being punctured with each new shot that hit him. His bones shattered under the impact of the bullets, but his curse prevented him from dying. The cycle of destruction and regeneration repeated endlessly. A scream of pure agony escaped, not from fear, but from the torture of having his body destroyed and remade countless times. Watching everything, the girl he had saved went into total panic. The horror of that scene was simply too much for her to bear. But even there, fallen and disfigured, his heart continued to beat. The torture of immortality was far from over. Then, something different happened. His hand touched the pool of his own blood on the floor. A strange connection formed, as if the spilled liquid responded to him, being pulled back into his body in a supernatural way. The blood spread across the floor of the shed, mixing with that of the men he had already defeated. The carnage was the stage for what was to come. At the center of his being, the core of his power pulsed with a dark energy. The source of his regeneration and his curse was awakening in a new way. Seeing that something was terribly wrong, the boss became desperate. He shouted to his men, realizing that the monster they were trying to kill was about to show his true face. And then, the spilled blood obeyed a new command. It rose from the ground, enveloping the boy and suspending him in the air, to the horror of everyone present. The leader of the henchmen couldn't believe what he was seeing. The scene defied all logic, and fear began to overcome the anger he felt. The transformation continued, with the young man's body being remade and strengthened by his own dark power. He was no longer the same person they had cornered. Following their boss's desperate orders, the henchmen opened fire, trying to destroy the aberration that was forming in front of them. The first shot hit its mark, piercing his head, a blow that should be final for any normal human being. But it didn't stop there. A hail of bullets tore through his body, piercing him from all sides without any mercy. Each impact should be agony, but something was different. The pain was familiar but strangely bearable. However, in the midst of the attack, the boy noticed something strange. Those wounds, which should be unbearable, didn't hurt as much as he imagined. The pain from the bullets was almost nothing compared to the memories that suddenly surfaced. Memories of suffering much, much worse that he had already endured in the past. He remembered the experiments, the inhumane torture that transformed his body and mind repeatedly. Compared to that endless agony, being shot was just a minor annoyance, a pain he had long overcome. And with that realization, the passivity ended. In the blink of an eye, the boy advanced and intercepted one of the aggressors. The force of the impact was devastating, crushing the henchman's face and throwing him away as if he were nothing. The young man they tried to kill no longer existed. In his place, there was something different, something colder, faster, and infinitely more dangerous. The first henchman was neutralized with a single blow. The boy's brutal strength deformed his face, showing that the fight had changed sides. Without losing a second, the boy was already on the next target. His speed was something the aggressors simply couldn't keep up with. The second henchman also fell before he even understood what hit him. The offensive was fast, precise, and absolutely merciless. Each punch sank in with a dry sound, breaking bones and any resistance the men could offer. There was no more room for defense. He was thrown with such violence that he went through the shed, leaving the other henchman paralyzed with shock and fear. The next on the list was caught completely by surprise, with no time to even raise his guard against the attack coming his way. In a relentless sequence, the boy took them down one by one. The hunted had become the hunter, and he was just getting started. But in the midst of the chaos, a memory struck him. He remembered what truly drove him crazy: the children who once protected him. The distraction lasted only an instant. The boy's retribution continued, merciless and overwhelming, throwing bodies everywhere. His face no longer showed pain or fear, just a cold determination and a clear goal: to finish them all. Seeing his men fall, the leader of the henchmen went into total panic. In an act of desperation, he grabbed the girl and used her as a hostage, threatening to shoot if the boy came any closer. But the threat didn't work. The boy didn't hesitate for a second, advancing and delivering a direct blow to the leader's face. The force of the punch was so intense that the sound of breaking bones filled the silence. The weapon was useless against that speed. With the leader incapacitated and already begging for his life, the boy prepared to finish what he started without showing any sign of mercy. Suddenly, a terrible memory surfaced. The moment he was separated from those who protected him, with the promise that one day he would see them again. That pain fueled his fury. That memory was the trigger. All the suffering and loss turned into an uncontrollable force that took over his body. The leader of the henchmen saw in the boy's eyes that there would be no forgiveness. Fear took over when he realized that his pleas would be completely useless. In desperation, he begged, promising to do anything to be spared, but it was too late for any kind of negotiation. The boy didn't hear a single word. His decision had already been made, and then the first blow came down with the force of a hammer, smashing the aggressor's face against the ground. The impact was brutal, breaking any trace of resistance that might still exist, but it didn't stop there. Punch after punch, the boy unleashed all his pent-up fury. It was a storm of blows that gave no respite, a punishment for everything he and the girl went through. At the end of the sequence, there was no longer an opponent, just the result of a merciless revenge. When he finally stopped, the silence that followed was heavy and absolute. The violence had ceased. His hands, covered in blood, trembled slightly. The revenge was complete. He stood there, standing over the body of the man who had tormented him. Justice, in his own way, had been done. The massacre was complete. No one who dared to touch the girl had been left standing. Justice, in his own way, had been done on a terrifying scale. But when the fury passed, all that was left was a deep exhaustion. The adrenaline that moved him finally abandoned him, leaving behind the weight of his actions. The girl, still in shock, asked if he was okay. She couldn't believe that someone could survive so many shots and still have the strength to fight like that. Ignoring his own exhaustion, he took a step towards her. Each movement was heavy, as if he were carrying the world on his back. He approached the young woman, who was still on the ground, unsure of what to expect from the one who had saved her so brutally. Fear took over her. The proximity of the boy, who had just committed a massacre, was terrifying, but instead of any threat, he simply collapsed. His strength was completely exhausted, and he fell on top of her. And then, the boy broke down. In tears, he thanked her for being alive, confessing that the dogs who protected her died in the process. The girl's expression changed. The monster she feared was actually a broken boy, crying for having lost his only friends. He admitted that his biggest fear was that she was dead too. The relief of finding her well was the only thing that mattered at that moment. She watched him, finally understanding the depth of his despair and loneliness. With a choked voice, he said that in fact, he was the one who should thank her. At that instant, something changed in the way she saw him. Compassion finally overcame fear. With a simple gesture, she comforted him, accepting the vulnerable boy behind the relentless monster. In the midst of the destruction he himself caused, the boy found a brief moment of peace. Her embrace was the only comfort in the midst of the chaos, a relief after the fury had passed. But the tranquility was short-lived. The police arrived at the scene, and the detective in charge began giving orders to arrest the gang's survivors. The remaining henchmen, completely defeated, were handcuffed without offering any resistance. For them, the fight had ended in the worst possible way. The police were shocked by the scene. The official version spoke of an internal fight, but the brutality was so great that they doubted it was the work of a simple dispute between gangs. Far away, hidden in the forest, the boy and the girl watched the patrol cars. They had escaped, but the weight of what happened that night was beginning to manifest itself. She tried to maintain her composure, but her face couldn't hide the guilt she felt. Under the moonlight, the young woman began to apologize to her dogs, calling for Choco, Biol, and Maru. She blamed herself, saying that they were only hurt because they followed her to save her. Guilt completely overwhelmed her. She felt that the little affection she offered became their world, and therefore they risked their own lives to protect her. Seeing her suffering was too much for the boy. The young woman's pain and despair became his too, and nearby was the cause of so much anguish. The dogs who defended her with such loyalty. The pack that followed and fought for her was now motionless on the ground, victims of the violence they tried to prevent. Amidst tears, she embraced the body of one of her companions, inconsolable. The boy tried to offer some comfort, but the loss seemed absolute and irreversible. Then, a desperate idea arose. He remembered that his blood had healing power and, in an act of pure instinct, bit his own finger, determined to try the impossible to bring them back. The girl looked at him, completely shocked, not understanding what he was about to do. That extreme gesture was the last hope to reverse the tragedy. Before the dog's motionless body, the boy didn't hesitate. The pain in his finger was the price he was willing to pay to try to reverse the tragedy he felt he had caused. He forced the wound, releasing the blood that carried his only hope of healing. And then, the power manifested. His blood was not ordinary, and the promise of a miracle began to take shape in his hand. But for him, it wasn't enough. Consumed by guilt, the boy punished himself again, biting harder. He acted as if his own pain could somehow pay for the life that was lost because of him. The girl saw the act of desperation and stopped him, holding his hand tightly. She couldn't let him hurt himself like that. With tears in his eyes, the young man stared at her. He felt responsible for the dogs' deaths and believed they would hate him for it. But the young woman denied it. She explained that the dogs would never hate him, as they adored and trusted him. She said that the animals had many scars and distrusted humans because of the mistreatment they suffered in the past. The boy listened in silence, never having imagined the past suffering that those dogs carried. The girl concluded that if they approached him without fear, it was because they felt a connection. Therefore, blaming himself would only make them sadder. Still, the loss was real. He held the small dog, the silence and the weight of the situation falling upon them. Overcome with guilt, the boy asked if she didn't hate him, since because of him, the friends and even the mother of that little dog were dead. He waited for the answer, prepared for the worst, while caressing the animal he couldn't save. But then, the girl's expression changed completely. With a slight smile, she revealed that this was the puppy of one of the dogs, and that she was relieved that he was alive. The boy was speechless. He expected hatred and resentment, but her reaction was the complete opposite. Genuine relief to see the little puppy safe. The tension dissipated, replaced by a shared silence in the forest. The girl explained that she was worried, as she hadn't seen the puppy in the midst of the confusion. Suddenly, the little animal turned around, breaking the calm moment. Everyone's attention turned to him, curious about what he would do. The puppy seemed completely oblivious to the tragedy, exuding an innocence that contrasted with the weight of the situation around him. And then, to the surprise of both of them, the puppy began to walk towards the boy, wagging his tail without hesitating for a second. He stopped right in front of the young man, who still couldn't understand why the animal was approaching him with such confidence. Seeing the creature's innocence, the boy slowly reached out his hand, a gesture of curiosity and perhaps a little acceptance. Without any fear, the puppy licked his hand, a sign of trust that caught the boy completely by surprise. Soon after, the little animal let out a low whine and snuggled up close to him, seeming exhausted from everything he had been through. In a matter of seconds, the puppy fell asleep. That gesture of total trust was something the boy hadn't felt in a whole time. Seeing the scene, the girl realized that they couldn't simply leave a newborn behind. But this created another problem. What to do with the boy? That small act of affection broke something inside the young man. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to feel something other than pain and loneliness. Suddenly, the girl got up and said she needed to make a quick call. The boy just watched, not understanding what was happening. She spoke to someone on the phone, explaining the situation and confirming a plan. From her tone, it seemed that she had found a solution for both of them. When the girl returned, she had a proposal. Her older sister wanted to meet him and might be able to help with the lab that was hunting him. A small light of hope appeared. Following the girl's proposal, the young man accompanied her through the streets. For the first time, someone was reaching out to help him, and he, still suspicious, accepted, taking the little puppy with him. The path led them to an ordinary apartment building. For the girl, it was home. For the boy, it was a completely unknown and, in his mind, potentially dangerous territory. Upon entering, the contrast with the world he knew was striking. A clean, organized, and safe place. It was all too new for him. Physical and mental exhaustion weighed on his shoulders. Even though he was finally in a safe place, he couldn't let his guard down, holding the puppy as his only anchor. The girl, on the other hand, acted with the naturalness of someone arriving home after school, relieved to have managed to bring the young man to a temporary shelter. She invited him to come all the way in, but he remained standing near the door, hesitant. Trusting someone wasn't something he did easily. Every gesture of kindness was analyzed. He still expected that at any moment, the situation would turn into another trap. It was then that, seeing his reflection in the glass, something caught his attention. He truly looked at himself for the first time since his regeneration was complete. The shock was immense. He realized that he had a complete face with cheeks, a nose, and lips. He didn't even know his regeneration had reached this point, since in the lab, the process was always slow and painful. Panicked, he grabbed the girl, trying to understand what was happening. She, in turn, was shocked by the revelation that he didn't even know his own appearance. His memories of the lab were of a body that barely healed, where each attempt at regeneration was followed by more experiments. He saw himself as an incomplete skeleton. Now, facing his reflection, he finally understood what he really looked like. It was like meeting a stranger who was actually himself. The girl listened to the story and became more and more shocked. His situation was heartbreaking, but there was something about his innocence that she found cute. While the boy processed everything, the puppy in his arms seemed completely at ease, bringing a bit of normalcy to that bizarre scene. The girl then asked something that bothered her: his age. The young man paused to think and began to calculate, using the few milestones he had: the day he entered the lab and the tests he did there. He began to add up the events he remembered: 7 comprehensive tests, countless experiments and tortures. After finally escaping, he counted that 3 seasons had passed. The math was simple, but the result was frightening. The girl, who was drinking water calmly, spat it all out upon hearing the result. It finally dawned on her. Despite everything he went through, the two were the same age. Still in shock, she approached him. The situation was heartbreaking, but his innocence moved her. At that moment, she decided that the formalities were over. The boy was completely embarrassed, being treated as an equal, being called by a name. It was such a new experience that he barely knew how to react. He confessed that he was happy just to be called something that sounded like a person. His sincerity caught her by surprise. It was a tragic story, but the purity with which he spoke about it was, at the same time, sad and endearing. Regaining her composure, she told him to go wash up, warning him that the food was almost ready. It was time to bring some normalcy to that bizarre situation. He agreed, still a little awkward. That place was the opposite of everything he knew: clean, organized, and smelling of real food. While the boy went to wash up, the puppy was also served and didn't waste a second diving headfirst into his meal. Following the instructions, the young man went to the sink, preparing for the first decent meal in years. At the table, he didn't hold back. The boy ate with a hunger that seemed accumulated from a lifetime, barely stopping to breathe between bites. The girl watched with a satisfied smile. She apologized for it being a simple meal, but for her, seeing him eat like that was already a reward. But for him, it was anything but simple. With his mouth still full, the boy assured her that it was, by far, the best meal he had eaten in years. After he finished eating, the girl began to tidy up the kitchen. The atmosphere was one of domestic calm that he had never experienced before, and the proof of his appetite was on the table. All the plates were completely scraped clean. He wasted absolutely nothing. After tidying up, she took him to the living room and pointed to the sofa. That would be his place to sleep that night. The girl handed him a blanket for the night. The boy, still processing everything, didn't seem to know how to react to such a simple and kind gesture. With a smile, she wished him a good night and turned off the light, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the novelty of that environment. The click of the switch and the sound of the door closing echoed in the silence. For the first time in a long time, he was alone, but not in a cold alley or a laboratory cell. He was in a safe place. The feeling was strange. The comfort was so new that it was even uncomfortable, and he felt completely out of place. He looked at the television, a thin and huge device, and was surprised at how advanced everything seemed outside of the place where he grew up. Every detail of that apartment, even the artificial flowers, seemed to belong to a world he never knew existed. Upon touching the sofa, he was shocked by its softness. It was more comfortable than any bed he ever had in the lab. Suddenly, he heard a noise coming from the corner of the room. A small dog devoured his food with the same hunger he felt earlier. The little creature ate everything so fast that he ended up throwing up a little on the floor. The boy's initial reaction was pure disgust, but then something clicked in his mind. He saw the small animal suffering, its weak body unable to hold down the food it so desperately needed. And at that instant, he saw himself in the dog's place. He remembered all the times his own body, hungry and exhausted, rejected the little food he could find. Panic took over. He ran towards the puppy, completely desperate to help in some way. But in his desperation, he ended up tripping and went straight on top of the small animal. The situation got completely out of control. After the clumsy stumble, the boy froze, expecting the worst. But to his surprise, the little pup seemed completely fine, just a bit confused by all the commotion. An immense relief washed over the young man. He realized the accident hadn't been serious, and he felt a little silly for all the panic. The incident ended up creating an unexpected bond. That night, the boy didn't sleep alone. He took the little companion to bed with him. The pup, feeling safe, quickly settled in, climbing all over the boy as he tried to sleep, completely at ease. Watching the little creature, the boy felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. A sense of affection and companionship began to emerge. For the first time in years, he didn't feel completely alone. The presence of that little being brought a warmth he had forgotten existed. He decided to give the pup a name, Fritter, a simple name for a new beginning, sealing the friendship that had just been born between them. With a full belly and a safe place to rest, Fritter finally fell asleep, calm and at peace. The boy watched him with a satisfied smile. That small moment of peace, after so much chaos, felt like a gigantic victory. He had also eaten a real meal, a simple plate of rice with egg, but for him, it was a feast fit for a king. And to top it off, he took a hot shower. The sensation of the water on his skin was a luxury he barely remembered anymore, and he allowed himself to feel genuine happiness. Even Fritter seemed to share the joy of the moment, enjoying the light and relaxed atmosphere that filled the place. Later, back in bed, the boy reflected on all of this. Food, a hot shower, a soft place to sleep, and now, a friend by his side. He finally understood that this was what people called happiness. However, as he fell asleep, a part of him knew that this peace was fragile, a kind of happiness that could be snatched away from him at any moment, and the boy's fragile peace was shattered. In a place that looked like a lab or hospital, a desperate escape began. People in patient gowns were running for their lives. Panic was visible on every face. They weren't just running away, they were being hunted. Behind them, a force of elite soldiers advanced, equipped for a war. The commander identified the targets as core mutants, all rank A or higher. The order was clear: leave not a single one of them to escape. The hunt began immediately. With an explosion, the floor of the corridor was destroyed and the first fugitives were knocked down without a chance. Incapacitated amidst the rubble, they were a brutal reminder of the power that pursued them. Without losing a second, another soldier prepared to fire. His weapon charged an intense energy, ready to disintegrate whatever was in front of it. But suddenly, the explosion came from the opposite direction. The soldiers were caught by surprise, thrown back by the force of the impact. The hunters realized that their targets were not easy prey. One of the escapees counterattacked, revealing her power. Blades of ice emerged from nowhere, showing that they also knew how to fight. Meanwhile, one of the fallen mutants, with a skull face, seemed to focus on the ground. He was injured, but he had not yet been defeated. That's when the boy took action. Using his own power, he created a barrier to protect his companion, revealing himself as one of the fugitives. All the peace he had found, came down to that moment. He had something to fight for now, and his expression showed that he wasn't going to back down. The fight had been brutal. The boy's companion was on the edge, but the determination to survive was stronger than any injury. One of the escapees shouted for them to keep going, reaching out in a desperate plea for no one to be left behind. The boy didn't hesitate, helping his ally to get up. In that escape, they were a team, fighting together for their lives. They barely managed to escape that place. Freedom was won by a thread, leaving behind a trail of destruction and danger. But even after everything, the memory of that suffering did not abandon him. The peace he found was fragile, built on pain. Lying in his bed, he thought of those who might still be suffering. The safety he had now seemed like an unfair luxury. Next to him was Fritter, the little being that represented all the happiness he had achieved, a symbol of everything he needed to protect, and he made a silent promise. If anyone dared to touch that little piece, then, no matter who it was, he wouldn't let it go cheap. A new determination took over the boy, one that would no longer accept losses, but the tranquility of a new day was about to be shattered. Suddenly, the boy ran desperately down the street. He was calling out for Fritter, his panic echoing through the neighborhood. His worst nightmare was unfolding. The peace he swore to protect had been destroyed in an instant, and now the promise he made would be put to the test.